Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Lifetimes Podcast. I'm your host, Maurice, and thank you so much for joining us in this very first episode where we'll explore the different life lessons, stories, and experiences of young Filipinos navigating through life and adulthood in a foreign society. Last week, I released my trailer, and just a disclaimer, I guess, or I wasn't supposed to actually release that trailer last week. I was supposed to release it this week after I would record my first episode, but my girlfriend pushed me into just releasing it. So what happened was I recorded it, and I was using the Anchor app to release the episode, to distribute it, and I was just giving it a try to see how long the process would take before the episode or the trailer actually goes online. And I didn't know it was very instant. So the moment it was out, the moment it was on Spotify, I sent it over to my girlfriend and she shared it right away. So I told her, no, let's just wait. She knows me a lot, and she knows that if I continue delaying it, I just end up not doing it at all. So she pushed me to just post it right away and see where it takes me, see where it goes. And during that, Anchor pushes the podcast on multiple platforms. I mentioned in the trailer, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. Up to this day right now, that trailer is posted on Breaker, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and on Spotify. It got rejected on Apple Podcasts. I think it's something with my title. I'm not too sure what it is. So I was just trying to see how long it would take for these to get posted. So far, Spotify is the fastest one, being Spotify owning Anchor, obviously. So I use Anchor for distribution, and on Spotify it was almost instant in having the episode online. So with the other podcasting platforms, it may take a while, it may take a couple days, but it will get there. So whatever platform you're using, please give us a follow the podcast, and yeah, thank you again. I can't say thank you enough here. So at the time of this recording, it is around 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, and this is actually the fourth time I'm recording this episode because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I focus on the details a bit too much on the things I try to create. Hence, things get delayed because I try to be perfect every time, and it's just not practical. And my first time recording the episode was earlier in the week. It was probably a day or two after I released the trailer. And I pretty much prepared a whole day just to get the script going. And while I was recording, I sounded like a robot. And it wasn't very practical to sound like a robot. So, first of all, it sounds really weird and does not sound natural. So I figured to record it again. And the second and the third one also didn't play out nice. So this is the fourth time I'm recording it, and right now I'm just running off through my notes so I can sound less of a robot, I guess. So being the first episode of this series, I figured what's the best way to start other than by sharing the vision as to why I started this podcast. So a little bit about me is I've always liked documentaries. I love watching documentaries. From history, technology, current issues, foreign affairs, not just locally, but even abroad or in different countries, in Asia, Europe. Europe has a lot of history, and there's a lot of documentaries out there. I'm really fascinated with learning history and just learning the different walks of life in different parts of the world. I always have documentaries running almost all the time. If you know me, I love music. I'm always listening to music. But during those times, I'm not listening to music. I have a documentary running. I may not be glued to my monitor watching the actual documentary, but I'm listening. I have it on speaker or I have my earphones on. I'm doing chores around the house while I'm working, while I'm organizing a couple things, while I'm doing chores. I would have those set of earphones on, just listening to these documentaries, just trying to absorb this information. And also growing up, I've loved hearing stories of other people from my family or even some people that I know personally. I love hearing these stories because these stories have different lessons and experiences that's very unique to that person, and the way they interpret those experiences can really provide these gems of wisdom, or gems of wisdom, if you will, or just random bits of artifacts of knowledge that's really, really cool. So a few years ago, when I got my DSLR, I wanted to make documentaries about just the different walks of life, just to document everyday life, because like I said, everyone has a story to tell. It's very unique to everyone. No matter what your status is in society, everyone has this unique story about themselves that can be shared. And that's just what I wanted to document at that time. It's similar to the photographers who do street photography, because what they're documenting there is everyday life through photographs. And just by photographs, they're able to tell this story filled with emotion. So that's something similar to I wanted to create, but in the form of documentaries, in the form of film, to present these stories to everyone. But after doing my research about these documentaries and how you actually produce them, it's a lot of work. You had to plan, you have to practice your shots, you have to do color correction. There's a lot of editing involved in, especially with video production. There's just so many things happening. And it's just, I could not learn all of that. It was way too advanced for my capabilities during that time. And also, like I said, being a perfectionist, I wanted to master all aspects of video production. And I just couldn't do that at that time. And it just burnt me out. And I ended up giving up. So that's why now I thought of this podcast, of doing this podcast, because there's no video editing involved, which I love. And also, I don't have to show my face. So it's right there in my comfort zone to just share these stories, share these conversations, and not worry about the other logistics of things in producing these. It's just raw and get the stories out there. And you never know, someone listening, maybe you, maybe your friend, maybe a family member, could be going through the same things or in the process of experiencing whatever it is that we're talking about, and we're able to learn from it. So that's why I wanted to do this podcast, and primarily I wanted to focus on the Filipino community. And the reason for that is because being a Filipino, what I've noticed with Filipinos is we're not very fond of small talk. What I'm in the standpoint I'm talking about is immigrant families. From my experience, they don't really engage in small talk, and it's not something that we have in the Philippines. You don't see strangers just engaging in small talk in the Philippines, at least from when I was growing up. And that's why when I came here to Canada, that's one thing that I could not understand, even during high school and college, and now in the workplace. Sometimes I could not understand the concept behind small talk, because I just never did it. I've never seen it actually happen. And it was not something that I would see in my parents or family members or relatives. And it's just, I was never accustomed to it. So that being said, from my experience, Filipinos are very self-preserved, but that does not mean they have nothing interesting to share. There's a lot of interesting stories that is unique to them, whether it was their journey on how they got to where they are right now, or the journey on how they made it to Canada, the story of their life here in abroad, not even Canada, their story in the different place that they're in. These stories that's very unique, and It's just interesting if we can share those stories and other people can learn from them. Like in one of the YouTube videos I watched, the best way to advance yourself in learning is to learn from the mistakes of others. Learning from the mistakes of others or the successes of others. So why not share these stories to everyone, to each other, to our communities, so that we can learn from them and make us better members of society. In the trailer, I mentioned young Filipinos, but to be honest, I don't want to stick to just the young Filipinos. Right now, I'm about 27 years old, and I still consider myself young. So, like even though I said young, I want to share stories from the younger generation, to my generation, and also the older generation, because, like I said, the experience of someone in the younger generation or in my generation or an older generation going through the same thing, their experience is not guaranteed to be the same. The experience of a person of a younger generation will be different from the experience that someone from the older generation has gone through. Because as time progresses, the circumstances that we are in while we encounter those situations in life is different. So the experiences and the life lessons that each person will carry will be different, even though that situation or that event in their life may be similar. Like, for example, a teenager moving to a different country, to Canada, for example, that experience alone will be different from an adult who is 30 years old moving from the Philippines to Canada. It's the same event that happened. They moved from one country to another, but the circumstances played out in their lives are both different. And having the circumstances different in both cases will yield different life lessons or experiences that is unique to that person. So these are the stories that we want to share. It can be anyone. So maybe you listening right now, maybe you have a story, or maybe you know someone who has an interesting story or a unique story that we can share. I encourage you to please reach out, and maybe we can work something, and let's see if we can get you on the show so we can share these stories with everyone in our community to help us to be the better versions of ourselves. And being focused on the Filipino community, for the episodes, I also plan to not only speak in English, but also speak in Tagalog, depending on the comfort level of whoever it is that I'll be talking to. And yeah, that is what I wanted to share with everyone, the vision I have for this podcast. And if this is something that you want to hear more about, and if you want to hear about these stories, I encourage you, please follow the podcast on whatever platform that you are using. If you're using Spotify, give us a follow on Spotify. We're also on Instagram. You can give us a follow on our Instagram page at the Lifetimes Podcast. And before we wrap up today, I can't stress this enough, but thank you so much for listening to the very first episode of the Lifetimes Podcast, where we'll explore the different life lessons, stories, and experiences of young and old Filipinos navigating through life and adulthood in a foreign society. Stay tuned for our next episodes, and bye for now.